Hey Luke, how are you, mate?
Good, Andrew. How are you, mate?
I'm pretty good. So hopefully the tech side of this is all working and this is actually going live. I'm sure we'll find out soon. But today we're here on Back of House and talking about a very important subject today in mental health. And we've got with us a great friend of mine and also a psychologist with an organisation called LIVIN. And Luke was out here and also presented to our company, and it was a fantastic day and training session, so we thought we'd speak to him and showcase him to a wider audience. But first I want to introduce Luke. So Luke, for over 8 years, served as a full-time psychologist in the Australian Defence Force, so attaining the rank of Major. Luke provided counselling to a range of people in the ADF in Australia on operations, so East Timor, Solomon Islands and Afghanistan, which I'm sure would have been a very interesting experience over there in Afghanistan. But you covered diverse mental health issues, which I'm sure people out there could understand that people in the Defence Force and going to those type of locations obviously would go through many mental health issues. So he's also provided specialist advice to inform the Army officer recruitment process, regularly assisting an advisory role as the lead psychologist. So Luke currently works as a mental health professional and for the charity LIVIN. And Luke, your role in LIVIN, do you want to just quickly explain what you do with the LIVIN organisation?
Certainly, mate. So I've been involved with LIVIN, gosh, it's a long time now, almost since inception. So LIVIN was created in 2013. I jumped on board largely as a volunteer in 2014. Whilst I was still in the military, still serving at that point in time. I was in Sydney. I met up with one of the co-founders, Sam Webb, back in 2014 and thought I'd help out from a mental health advice perspective, just helping the organisation to make sure they were saying the right things and addressing the key issues within the mental health space. So that was all the way back in 2014. When I got out of the full-time army in February 2017, mate, to be honest, I was a little bit lost. I thought I had it all mapped out, thought I had my dream job mapped out, but it just didn't work out that way, and I found myself searching for meaning and purpose. So I lent on LIVIN a little bit for that meaning and purpose, and I asked both Sam and the other co-founder, both great mates of mine now, if I could work for them. And thankfully, they both said, mate, we'd love to have you on board full time. So in terms of what I do for LIVIN now, largely involved in the educational elements of LIVIN's LIVIN Well program. So it's 45-minute mental health awareness stigma reduction program. I'm heavily involved in the development, refinement of that program. I also train up facilitators, but more broadly I provide mental health advice to everyone within LIVIN and also the broader LIVIN community. It's a pretty busy role, but mate, it's a role that warms the heart, and it certainly has provided that meaning and purpose that I was longing for when I left the military that I couldn't find for some period of time, and that caused me a lot of heartache.
Yeah, fantastic. And you've also, a co-founder of an organisation called Checkmate, and that was some mental health training that we undertook here, and I found sort of very effectful in sort of helping me sort of look at issues and also identify, issues that colleagues may have. So certainly that sort of process was very useful.
Mate, I really enjoyed delivering that Checkmate program, not only to yourself, because you're a good mate of mine, and I always enjoy turning on the professionalism in front of my good mates. So I had a great time delivering that program to yourself, but Unilever as a whole organisation, we're a wonderful organisation to present to, and I had the opportunity to deliver a couple of sessions to Unilever and had a couple more lined up before this whole COVID-19 bullshit hit us.
Yeah, and going on about that, I mean, so talking about hospitality industry, and a lot of us chefs and cooks and whoever works in the kitchen, we're pretty sociable sort of people. So obviously, not being able to do the job that people love or is quite difficult. So what sort of issues that people will be seeing in terms of mental health these days, in terms of this COVID? Because obviously social interaction has been extremely limited. So are there any sort of tips and advice you can give people on sort of how to deal with that?
It's really interesting when I hear you talk about the hospitality industry being such a social industry. I couldn't agree more. The thing that has always amazed me about the hospitality industry, though, is how unsociable the hours are. So it's a bit of a contradiction, really. Such a sociable industry working such unsociable hours, but that's probably a conversation that we can talk about in a moment. In terms of not being able to do the things that you ordinarily like doing, like going to work, catching up with your family and friends, losing that social connection, that social connectedness that is so key for our mental health. I guess one of the primary points that I've been telling people, and a lot of people have been reaching out to me asking me, what do I do? I've lost that social connection. I told them to get creative. I mean, Andrew, look at us right now. We're talking over, what platform are we even on? We're on Microsoft Teams at one point. We're on Skype.
We're here. That's all.
We're on Facebook Live. So whatever platform we're on, it's above my head. But there's so many different platforms, so many opportunities for us to be social these days, recognising the power of technology. But not even that. I mean, the opportunity to go outdoors and exercise. You see other people outdoors exercising. Something as simple as, "G'day mate, how's your day going?" Or a wave, a smile. Talking to the checkout chick, the checkout dude at the register at your Woolworths, at the petrol station. Even those small snippets of social connection are really, really good for our mental health. They actually trigger feel-good chemicals in our brain that make us feel good about ourselves. I'll give you a classic example too, and I shared this in a LIVIN well not too long ago. I was at my local Woolworths not long ago in Palm Beach. I live on the Gold Coast, and I was walking out of Woolworths, and this bloke in a high-vis outfit, clearly he'd been working that day, was walking towards me, and me being the polite person I am, not always, but on this occasion I was polite, I said, "G'day mate," and he turned to me and he said, "G'day mate." He clearly had a couple of stubbies, which is fine in moderation. I'm not going to criticise him for that because he was a wonderful fella, but as he walked past me, he yelled out to me, and I turned around and he said, "How shit's all of this shit, bro?" Clearly referring to COVID-19, and I thought, yeah, mate, it's pretty shit, isn't it? And then he said something to me. He said, "At least we're all in it together, brother." And I thought to myself, you're exactly right, we're in this fight together. And when I got back in my car, even that small interaction, that small social interaction, made me feel really good about myself. So, yep, absolutely right. We're probably not experiencing the same amount of social connection in the same format that we used to, but there's still opportunities to be social. And the research is definitely out there that social connection, being social with one another, other human beings, is one of the greatest predictors of human resilience. So, utilise the power of technology when you get the opportunity to speak to other people, be your neighbour, the bloke in the high-vis outfit out the front of Woolworths. Utilise those opportunities to be social. It's good for your mental health.
All right, fantastic answer. And look, I want to sort of touch on something. So, mental health in hospitality, and as a chef, there's a bit of a stigma around it. If you sort of, say you've got a mental health issue, 5-10 years ago, you're a loser. You don't speak about that type of thing in the kitchen. So, look, my question is: everyone has problems, everyone has a story, and probably more so now. But why do you think it's so hard for chefs to talk about their issues and seek help?
I can't specifically talk about the chef industry because I've never worked in it, but I can imagine it's very much like other industries that I go out to and present my LIVIN Well program to. It's very much this umbrella term called stigma. You know, people are scared that they'll be judged. They're scared that they'll be ostracised. They're scared that they'll be discriminated against. But Andrew, when you look at the statistics surrounding mental ill health in this country, it's pretty staggering. Almost 50% of Australians experience mental illness over the course of their lifetime. Every 3.5 hours in Australia, someone takes their own life. Less than 50% of people with a mental illness choose to seek professional support. And I think a lot of it does come back to this thing known as stigma. Fear of being perceived as the psycho, the weirdo, the weak one. But something that I always reflect on, mate, if you're struggling, oftentimes you feel incredibly alone. But when you look at those statistics, or if you reflect on those statistics that I just rattled off, and I could rattle off a whole lot more, if you are feeling alone, you need to recognise that there's so many people out there just like you. They might be experiencing things a little bit differently, but there's a lot of people out there who are also struggling. Another thing, sometimes when we're struggling, it feels like we're bloody abnormal, like no one will understand what we're going through. Mm-hmm. But again, if you reflect on those statistics, if you really reflect on them, you'll realise that if you do speak up, if you take that courageous step of speaking up about what you're going through, the struggles that you're going through, a lot more people than you realise will understand what you're going through, but you need to have the courage to speak up. And that's why LIVIN's mantra, I think, is so powerful. The mantra that it ain't weak to speak, because when you start talking, you quickly realise that there are a lot more people than you realise out there also experiencing some of the same struggles that you're experiencing. And when you start talking to each other, that creates that connectedness that is so key for longevity in life, so key for human resilience.
All right.
I want to answer your question, mate. I apologise.
No, all good. So, something that unfortunately has been common in the past, and I've actually known quite a few chefs who have passed away from sort of substance abuse, long-term maybe alcohol or drugs. It is common in our industry. Chefs work long hours, unsociable hours, and that's a fact of life, unfortunately. So, can you give any quick tips on how to sort of deal with maybe a reliance to alcohol and or drugs?
Yeah, so I always look at any type of behaviour, whether it be drug abuse, alcohol abuse, self-harm, what is driving that for that individual. And oftentimes it's a struggle in life, and sometimes people turn to things that aren't good for them to deal with the struggle in their life. Whereas at LIVIN, we're very much about promoting those things in life that are healthy for you, things that we call adaptive coping strategies. So a lot of people, without the knowledge, the education that I have as a psychologist, that a lot of the people within the organisation that I work for have, a lot of my colleagues have, turned to adaptive coping strategies, things like exercise, making sure they're scheduling in time to catch up with people who make them feel good about themselves, making sure they're getting enough sleep. But people without that education often turn to shit that makes them feel, in the short term, it might make them feel good about themselves, but invariably leaves more problems in their life. You mentioned those unsociable hours that chefs work. You finish your shift and you might go to a party, and guess what? You've got a lot of catching up to do because you joined that party late, so you drink twice the amount of alcohol in the shortest amount of time possible. You end up doing drugs at the detriment of doing things that are good for yourself, like going home to get proper amounts of rest, going home and eating a healthy and nutritious meal, going home and doing exercise. So I oftentimes look at the drivers of behaviour And in the case of chefs, it might be that they're being overworked. I don't really hear the word relaxed associated with the life of a chef. Oftentimes it's pressure, time to plate up, 5 minutes left. So perhaps the amount of substance abuse and drug abuse within the chef trade, and I don't know exact statistics, or a byproduct of the stressful nature of the role and the lack of knowledge and understanding about alternative things that they can do to make them feel good about themselves. Oftentimes it's not drugs and alcohol. You can turn to exercise, you can turn to catching up with good people in your life that make you feel good about yourself, that can have the same impact.
All right, fantastic. And I want to sort of quickly touch on about how you can actually ask someone and find out, sort of how they're going. Because you talked about in the training some open-ended questions and that. So how do we sort of ask a question that's suitable to find out maybe if a friend or colleague's going through a tough time?
I think the first part of it, mate, and hopefully you remember this from the training, is firstly understanding warning signs and symptoms. So how do you actually know if you may be struggling? How do you know if the person around you is in a position where perhaps you reaching out to them might be beneficial? Now, there's a whole heap of warning signs and symptoms that most of the viewers out there watching would be aware of: social withdrawal, substance abuse, crying, rocking in the fetal position in the corner of a room, getting angry. I mean, the list goes on and on and on and on and on. But really, one of the most important warning signs and symptoms is any deviation from what is normal behaviour for that individual. So if you notice that in somebody around you, then realistically you have a choice. I mean, you've got a choice to do something or to do nothing. Hopefully people with a little bit of education, a little bit of understanding about how to do that something, choose to do something, and that something doesn't need to be very difficult. It doesn't need to be poetic brilliance. It doesn't need to be really, really complex. You can just turn to a person you're worried about and say, "Hey mate, I noticed that you're not your usual self lately. How are you going?" And the default response, as we know based on research, will probably be, "I'm all good, I'm fine." But you can follow that up with, "No mate, I have noticed that things seem a little bit off. How are you really going?" I'm somebody that you can turn to, somebody that you can open up to. "I'm a little bit worried about you. How are you really going, mate?" It can be as simple as that, Andrew. I mean it. I really do mean it. Some of my counselling sessions, if you saw me as a psychologist, they are quite simple. The questions that I ask, they're not rocket science. Sure, there might be a bit of theory that I've learnt that some of the viewers out there haven't learnt, but in terms of opening up a conversation, it doesn't need to be that difficult. We've got days like "Are you okay" day. I mean, I prefer open-ended questions because usually open-ended questions yield more open responses, gives people the opportunity to be more open. But worst case, "Are you okay, mate? I'm worried about you. Are you okay?" And then you can follow up with an open-ended question like, "How are you going? How are you really going? Speak to me, I'm here for you."
All right, fantastic. And look, I sort of read the other day, there's potentially going to be, an increase in suicides and all this based on sort of COVID. But also I read another issue about the fact that, people are getting used to the new norm, sort of working from home, and potentially might struggle sort of adapting back to, life sort of as it was before. Any sort of tips on that and how to sort of reintegrate back into sort of normal life and get over this sort of working from home and sitting on the couch all day?
That's actually really interesting. I probably haven't done as much thinking around that as you have, Andrew, in terms of going back to the new norm. People experience a lot of anxiety because of uncertainty, ambiguity. No doubt the news and all those dramatic headlines contributed to people feeling anxious, a little bit lost, concerned in the lead up to lockdown. But as these restrictions are lifted, I guess there's some people out there who are actually experiencing a similar uncertainty and ambiguity about returning back to work. So my advice would be to be patient, give yourself time. If you are struggling, be open about your struggles. Be open about your struggles with the people around you. Be open about your struggles with your bosses, your managers. But ultimately, give yourself time to adjust to the new norm. Just like it took a bit of time adjusting to lockdown and having to come up with new ways to do the things that you used to be able to do. Give yourself time to readjust to the new norm as these restrictions are lifted. And also recognise that just because everybody else around you might be happy about returning to the new norm, doesn't mean that you necessarily have to be really, really happy. Mm-hmm. In some strange way, you might have really enjoyed the COVID experience. I'm not saying that you would have enjoyed people dying. It was a real cruel and unfortunate fact that a lot of people have died and will continue to die as a result of coronavirus. But some people might have enjoyed the luxury of sitting at home for extended periods of time working from home. They might have enjoyed the reduced traffic on the road. So I can understand, since you just raised it, that people might be a little bit anxious about returning to the new normality. So don't be too hard on yourself if you are experiencing that. Give yourself time, patience, and think about how you're going to readjust to going back to life as normal. Even reflect, a good strategy might be to reflect on the things that you were doing pre-COVID or working for you. Really have to think a reflection of those things that you were doing pre-COVID that were making you feel good about yourself. Write it down, write a list of some of those things, and maybe slowly start to reintroduce those things into your life post-COVID-19.
All right, well, fantastic answer, Luke. It was a bit of a question without notice. So look, we will sort of post below some resources, and we'll do that after the feed. But any sort of quick ones in terms of where to go to for resources? You know, off the top of your head, the best sort of resource to go to for any help or chat, or be it the phone or internet.
Yeah, so it depends. It depends what sort of support you're looking for. I mean, if you're after information about the coronavirus, of course, go to official government websites like the Department of Health. If you're after mental health specific resources, as in mental health information, I think Beyond Blue, Lifeline, Headspace, LIVIN are all wonderful organisations. If you're after crisis support, so if you think you've reached a crisis point in your life and you're like, shit, I need some support now, Lifeline, I think, on 13, 11, 14 is a wonderful organisation. If you're after some more long-term mental health support, the best avenue is still through your trusted GP. So book an appointment with your GP, have a chat with your GP. If the discussion leads to the fact that you might need some mental health support, your GP can write you up a mental health care plan, refer you to a psychologist, and that entitles you to 10 to 12 Medicare rebated sessions per year. And I do know that a lot of psychologists at the moment, by telehealth, soon will become more face-to-face, but a lot of psychologists at the moment are offering bulk billed or certainly heavily reduced psychological support rates. So if you're after some long-term counselling, that GP pathway is still the best way to go. Get a mental health care plan and referral to a psychologist that way. Right. Of course, mate, one last one. If there's ever imminent threat to your life, so self-harm, suicide, homicide, there's no reason to stuff around at all. Call 000. That is the best number. All
right, fantastic. And just so you know, we will post all that information after this. And I want to talk just quickly, Luke, about sort of something that we've sort of done in the hospitality industry. We've started a thing called Fair Kitchens, which is sort of promoting the fair treatment of chefs, in terms of mental health, and so we're trying to change sort of the way chefs are sort of treated, and we've got some ambassadors, including a great chef called Amanda Fuller from the Sam Prince Hospitality Group, and it's all about getting chefs to take the appropriate amount of leave. It's about the chefs not working 12, 14-hour double shifts a week. And it's been really taken on by the industry, because it's time for us to change. Otherwise, we're going to have no sort of young chefs wanting to join our industry. So it's certainly something that is great, and change is sort of needs to happen. Otherwise, we don't get paid that much as a chef. So you need to be treated well and in a great environment. So there's sort of finally seeing some good change within the hospitality industry. So
I think that's brilliant, mate. And what kick-started that?
I think it's industry sort of led. I think we've shown in Australia there's a massive shortage of chefs. So a lot of them are coming in on 457 visas from overseas, because young kids don't want to be chefs. And look, do you blame them? They get paid less as than a labourer would, and a labourer works from 7 till 3. On Monday to Friday, and chefs work unsociable hours and would get paid considerably less. So it's a sort of a no-brainer. So I think change needed to happen, and it's being led by some industry figures, and I think it's a great sort of positive for our industry. So
that's excellent. And when I think about life as a chef, I mentioned it before. The word that springs to mind is definitely not relaxed. It's very much the opposite. It's high pressure, high stakes, perfectionism. So if the industry as a whole can start promoting it, yes, at various times in your career there's going to be high pressure, but to balance that out with adaptive strategies like appropriate breaks, regular working hours, encouraging chefs to prioritise things like exercise, fatigue management, social support, avoiding things like drugs and alcohol, education in that space. If the industry starts promoting that more and more, I think you'll start to actually get more and more chefs into the actual industry. So that's a great initiative. I'm really happy to hear that.
All right, Luke, so before we sort of wrap up, I want to know, what are you doing for dinner tomorrow night?
What am I doing for dinner, mate? I don't know if I'm allowed to say this, but I've signed up for a meal delivery service, and I'll see whatever the recipe card suggests that I cook tomorrow night.
Mate, of course you can say that, but what you're going to do, even if you maybe keep that meal...
Say that again?
No, I said, well, what you got to do is you're going to get takeaway tomorrow if you can, because what we're doing, we're promoting a national day of takeaway tomorrow on Tuesday, May the 19th, to assist the food service industry, hospitality. So we're encouraging everyone to eat alone together. So go out to your local cafe, restaurant, or eatery and take away tomorrow. So support the hospitality industry, which has been decimated immensely by the laws that have come in, rightly so. But so we're promoting a national day to support those sort of small local eateries. So if you can, put that meal in the freezer and go out and buy a meal takeaway or delivery if you must, and eat alone together.
Mate, no worries. I won't thaw out that chicken too soon, and I'll jump on one of those apps and order some takeaway.
All right, Luke. So, look, I want to thank you very much for your time, and we will post up some links after. But as I said, is there anything else you want to quickly sort of say about LIVIN before we sort of wrap up?
No, I mean, LIVIN at the moment is working harder than ever. It's been an interesting time for LIVIN, as you can imagine. Usually we're out there delivering our education face to face, but we haven't been able to do that. So we've been working incredibly hard on new innovative ways to get our message out there, and a lot of that is via social media. But we've also got a new program, our new LIVIN Well online program. So if you're interested in anything to do with LIVIN, please visit the website. That's the recommendation I have for all the viewers out there who are watching. Visit the website. All of the information is contained on the website, and just because of coronavirus doesn't mean LIVIN stopped in our mission to smash the stigma surrounding mental health and ultimately to help prevent people from dying too young. We think it's ridiculous that so many people are dying too young, and we're striving to stop that from happening. But I want to thank you for the opportunity to get on here, mate, to get on Facebook and shoot the breeze, talk about some basic strategies that hopefully everyone can apply in their lives.
All right, fantastic, and yeah, much appreciated, Luke, and sharing your knowledge as a psychologist, and also I think the way that you can relate to the hospitality industry is also helped us out as well. So hopefully we've got more than 2 people watching, your mum and my mum, and hopefully everyone out there has enjoyed it. So just thanks again, mate. Much appreciated.
No worries, Andrew. Good to see you, mate. I hope we catch up with you very, very soon. We'll have a meal together.
We'll have a meal together for sure. All right. Thanks very much, Luke. Cheers.
Great to chat, mate. See you later.